Joining me now is the former Energy Secretary Ernie Moniz. He played a central role in negotiating the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. He's now the founder and CEO of the Energy Futures Initiative Foundation. Secretary Moniz, good to see you again. Thank you for being with us.
Good to see you, Ali.
Let's talk about this. This deal does not address anything to do with nuclear stuff right now. In theory, that's the goal. Tell me, having had a chance to think about this, what could happen next? Could there be some deal that looks a little bit more like what you negotiated leading up to 2015?
Well, first of all, Ali, I think you said it correctly that, in effect, the Memorandum of Understanding, the MOU signed today, should not be thought of as an Iran deal. It's basically an oil and commodities deal. I think that the impacts on the global economy were turning up the heat, frankly, and the decision was made to go forward with this MOU that, as you say, leaves essentially all the hard problems to be addressed in the next 60 days, which is a very, very short time for that set of problems. I think it's also worth noting, in terms of the path forward, that the three major problems that we had to deal with in 2015, I mean, globally, were nuclear, the nuclear issue, of course, missiles, and I would add to that now drones, and, of course, proxies. President Obama made the strategic choice that we would go sequentially, try to address those one at a time and make real progress. And I think that happened on the nuclear side. Of course, the progress was interrupted, shall we say, in 2018.
Right.
I think that the current administration and our Israeli allies made the decision to, in fact, revisit this and try to resolve all the issues at once. Well, what we see today in the MOU is already a reversion, in effect, to the sequential approach. It says absolutely nothing about missiles, about proxies. It does limit or try to limit Israel's prerogatives in Lebanon, but it says nothing about proxies. And in the agreement itself, it says very clearly that the future negotiations will be confined to the articles in the MOU. Therefore, those issues presumably will not be touched. So we are back to square one with a nuclear negotiation with, frankly, in my view, a much less propitious place to be than we were even back in 2015.
Yeah, I didn't. I mean, I mentioned you were the energy secretary, so you understand very well this whole idea that the Strait of Hormuz became the central issue here, as opposed to Iran's nuclear capabilities. But at one point, when the defense secretary was asked, you know, this is costing us this much money, and he said, well, how much is it worth to prevent Iran from hitting the U.S. with a nuclear bomb? I just want to be clear: Iran doesn't have a nuclear bomb, nor does it have a missile capable of hitting the United States.
Those are both correct, certainly as far as I know. Yes.
So you spent, one might have liked or not liked the 2015 deal, but I like to remind people it took a long time. People like you and your counterparts in Iran spent a lot of time on a lot of minutia, a lot of detail. We've got 60 days here. I suspect they're going to have to push that deadline back, because unless they're going to just cut and paste your deal, which is possible, they could take the things that you discussed, because you spent a lot of time working out the finest points of Iran's nuclear program.
Yes, although I would say that the Iranian program, since President Trump in his first term withdrew from the agreement, Iran is in a very different place in terms of the its nuclear assets. And I don't say that to imply that they're in a worse place. In particular, they have, over the last 5-6 years, produced almost half a ton of so-called 60% enriched uranium. The reason I focus on that is to say that there is a misimpression that one needs what's called weapons-grade uranium, 90% enrichment, to make a weapon. That is incorrect. 60% enriched uranium could be used directly in a nuclear bomb. Therefore, with their previous activities, plus that material, frankly, Iran was already in a position where if they decided to make a bomb, they had everything that they needed. So I think in this next 60 days, there are two particularly important, in my view, areas to focus on. One is this 60% uranium has got to be identified, found out where it is, what condition it is, and gotten rid of, probably through blending it back to very low enrichment with the international inspectors monitoring that. So that's one thing which we did not have in 2015 and is a worse situation today, despite the bombing of June 2025 that presumably has a fair amount of that material under some rubble, but we don't even know how much, to be honest. The second issue is, I think, as you know, Ali, we always said in 2015 and since then that the most important nuclear part of the 2015 agreement were the extraordinary verification measures that Iran agreed to. There's none of that, of course, even referred to in the MOU today, and that has to be a very, very high priority for the negotiators. And in particular, I want to emphasize it won't be good enough to have verification measures for the inspectors in looking at sites that Iran declares to be nuclear sites.
They've got to be able to get wherever they want to go.
The possible covert sites.
Yeah.
That's going to be a tough row to hoe after this military operation. But that is key for the negotiators.
Keep your phone on. Hopefully they'll call you for some guidance on this. Secretary, good to see you again. Ernie Moniz. I doubt it too. But I appreciate that you're at least talking to us. Ernie Moniz, former Secretary of Energy and a chief negotiator, one of the lead negotiators in the 2015 Iran nuclear deal.